Good afternoon. My name is John Tierpire, Director of the Unemployment Law Project. I'm here with ULP's Policy Director and Staff Attorney, Ann Paxton. Today we will begin with an update on unemployment insurance issues from Ann, and then take your questions afterwards. So be sure to put your questions in the Q&A. Unemployment Law Project is a nonprofit legal services office providing free advice and representation for people with Washington State unemployment claims. We have offices in Seattle and Spokane, but we operate statewide since the unemployment hearings are by telephone conference calls. I would like to introduce Ann Paxton, our staff attorney and ULP policy director.
Thank you, John, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for tuning into our webinar. So just want to go over a little bit on what's happening, what has been the impact of Omicron on unemployment and unemployment claims. Just update you on trends in call volume, which has been probably number one source of complaints over the last couple of years, and some new program priorities at ESD. So first on the Omicron impact, there's been a very big increase in initial unemployment claims across the country, an average of about 15,000 over the last 4 weeks. So it means that even though millions of workers have already run out of benefits, the crisis is still continuing, and the census data show that Omicron actually swelled in early January. 12 million people were out of work because they were either sick themselves or they were caring for someone sick with COVID, or they feared an illness. And another almost 7 million people were not working due to COVID-based layoffs. And this is going to be important, as I'll mention a little bit later, for benefits in the next few months. And this has been unevenly distributed in terms of the impact. 28% of Latinx workers, 22% of Black workers, 14% of Asian workers, and 12.5% of white workers. So you can see there's quite a spread in terms of the percentage of people who are getting hit by unemployment and needing to file benefits. So there is kind of a national push now to get some kind of national action to buffer the population, the working population, especially in families, from these kinds of ups and downs in the pandemic, but also in the impact on the workplace. So what the National Employment Law Project is trying to get awareness about is a movement to encourage Congress to act permanently. It's called the Fix UI movement. No matter what happens next, because people are being thrown out of work, continue to be thrown out of work, and they need to access benefits. Interestingly, I wanted to mention that something that ESD reported last week at its Unemployment Insurance Advisory Committee, and that is the update on call volume. So this chart is interesting because it shows the number of calls that have been coming in since January 2021, when there was a very big peak of 571 calls coming in at that point, and there was a smaller peak in September when after the PUA and PEUC benefits were expired, when it was still very high at 379,000. But notice in November it had dropped down to 50,000. It had dropped down to 50,000 calls, and the interesting thing is that the wait times that doesn't really show on this particular chart, but the wait times in November were very low. People could get through almost right away. So that was a little bit of a fluke. It hasn't been continuing, but we are hearing less frustration on the part of claimants who call us. But the interesting thing here to me is that in September, the 379,000 calls came in and about 50,000 calls were answered. In November, only 50,000 calls came in and about 48,000 calls were answered. So that shows virtually the same number of calls were answered in the peak month of September as were in the low month of November. So this strongly suggests that staffing at ESD is not adjusting in any kind of effective way to the significant increases or variations in call volume. And it's been like that since the beginning of the pandemic. The bureaucracy doesn't move that fast, but this is a really, really significant one when you have this kind of factor of difference in terms of the hold times and in terms of the accessibility of claims agents to answer questions. So there were two important programs that, let me go back here. There are actually three important program priorities at ESD right now. So I wanted to relay this to you because it's interesting that ESD does have this alert mechanism at the top of its homepage on the web, but it's had the same three alerts there now for several months. So it would be helpful if some of these stories that I'm going to tell you about program priorities were getting exposure at the alert level on the website as well. So the first one is they're doing the disaster unemployment program in response to all of the November 2020 in response to last year's flooding that focused mainly on Whatcom County. So that was that results in a lot of people being thrown out of work after a lot of people were displaced. Maybe about 500 people lost their homes and others had to be relocated because of the mudslides and the flooding. So there is already a federal program called Disaster Unemployment Insurance. And in fact, PUA was based on that it's something that exists in the background waiting for mainly state-based, local, regional disasters to be ready. But now this is going to kick in for that particular disaster, and that's what they're working on right now. This would have been November 13th to November 20th that the flooding occurred, and the benefits would extend for about 26 weeks. They're saying the benefits would go for about 26 weeks once they're approved. And this, what disaster unemployment insurance does is it includes, it provides income support to workers who don't qualify for regular unemployment because of they're in a disaster situation. And it can include workers who don't have enough covered employment to qualify for a claim. So just like PUA, if you have less than 680 hours, or you've exhausted your regular unemployment eligibility, or if you have other reasons related to the disaster, that's when this will kick in. So it's kind of a small version of what kicked in big time at the national level with PUA and PEUC. So ESD says it will have more information available on its website, and they're asking people to amplify the message to reach everyone who might need this assistance, that there is a need for communication on this, which I certainly agree with. And they're saying also, so there's two other major programs now that what they've referred to them as are reachbacks. That means they are going retroactively back to fix or to improve their coverage of people that occurred in an earlier period. So there's a relatively small program, which I've mentioned a few times, the mixed earner unemployment compensation, which is geared to help people who have self-employment income. They got a little bit cheated on their benefit because it was impossible. It was very difficult to include both self-employment income and regular W-2 income when you're trying to qualify for benefits. So this would give them an extra $100 a week, but this is going to go back to the beginning of this year. So it would, the beginning of last year, 2021. So it would add up in many cases to significant amount of benefits in the thousands of dollars. That's a small program though. The big program is self-certifying PUA benefit. This could be potentially thousands of people affected. So what is included in this? This is actually a program that was supposed to take effect last February. It was a change in the law at the Department of Labor. And what they said was that they would, individuals would be allowed to self-certify, that is not have to bring in a bunch of outside proof, self-certify that they refuse to return to work that was unsafe or accept an offer of new work that is unsafe. Or second, certain individuals that were providing services to educational institutions. And more importantly, third, individuals who are experiencing a reduction of hours or temporary or permanent layoff. Now, for the last year, these have all been reasons to qualify for PUA. But the way ESD is set up, this program was not technically implemented. So people may have been able to argue on appeal that they qualified and maybe succeeded in that. But when they, at the adjudication end, they may had a strong likelihood of getting turned down. So ESD is now going back to retroactively grant these people benefits. They're trying to place calls to people they think are potentially qualified. And if they do, they will let them self-certify that, yes, I turned down this job because of the risk of catching COVID. Or I didn't want to go back to my job because it was unsafe because of COVID. So it remains to be seen what will be the impact totally of this, but it could be potentially thousands of people. We are trying to get a lot more clarification on this. We don't actually know if adjudicators were restricting eligibility and not permitting self-certification, although we think that's what happened. But it was also just a delay in implementing the programs, which has been kind of a consistent theme, just because obviously many programs were very big and the staff wasn't big enough, but the agency has been lagging significantly. And this is one of the ways they're trying to catch up. Finally, just want to mention about the legislative session, which is dealing with several unemployment issues right now. The bill that we worked very seriously on for a few years is the caregiving inaccessibility voluntary quit. So what would this do? Washington has a very restrictive list of, depending on how you formulate it, 12 good causes to quit. So you can quit if there's domestic violence. You can quit if there's an illness in your family, you have to somebody you have to take care of. Those would qualify as good cause quits. But that list is very, very restricted. And one thing it does not cover is people who have conflicts with their caregiving that they have to provide. And this involves a huge number of people in the state. More than 500,000 people in this state have to provide caregiving for a family member, say an elderly, vulnerable adult, for example, and work and have a job. So part-time, even a full-time job. So those conflicts are happening all the time, but there's a lot of inflexibility on the part of employers in adapting and allowing their schedule to adapt to accommodate people. So what happens? They have to quit because they have to get caregiving has been becoming inaccessible, and that's what they have to cover. That has to come before their job in almost all cases. So the responsiveness has been very short on this, and we hope that there will, in the part of employers, we're hoping that this caregiving voluntary quit bill will make more progress. It's gotten farther this session than it has ever before. So we're hopeful that it will move this year. There's also a possibility of getting some additional claims processing improvements in the law that was passed last session. That's it's very very changeable over at the legislature. Sometimes you're up, sometimes you're down, sometimes you're in, sometimes you're out. You don't actually know what's happening all the time because bills are very, very hard to get through. Only a few hundred are actually passed every year, and thousands are introduced. And there is another bill that is also interesting, probably not going to be a live option this year, but there will be a hearing on it, and that is the state-based program, not the federal unemployment program, state-based unemployment insurance program for undocumented workers. That is people who cannot get benefits now because of their immigration status. So that's going to get some attention. It will raise the profile of that issue at the very least. The fact that all of these, and farm workers are a big component of this. Many workers cannot get any compensation while they're unemployed, and it's extreme hardship for a lot of families. So if that profile of that problem is raised, then that will create an environment, hopefully, that will make it easier to get some kind of accommodation through for that group in the next session. So that's the news for this week.
Thank you, Ann. Now we can move to questions. Let's see, the first question, we have a number of questions here. First question is, do you know how they figure PUA benefits? This person writes, I can't get an answer on my claim. Earnings for 2020, it lists certain earnings, 84,060K on Section C IRS filing, and my max benefit has been 269 for 40 weeks. So just one thing I want to say first. So if it's the PUA benefit, we're not talking regular unemployment, but the PUA benefit during certain periods also included a supplement of either $600 from the period from March, let's say February, March of 2020 to July, and then $300 for various weeks added on for some weeks after. So that's why it can be sort of complicated, because it came and went. It was very political. In 2020, Congress, I think, would have extended it, perhaps, that supplement, but the president did not want it, so it didn't pass, and then it came back. As far as figuring PUA, and I want to turn this to Ann, but I believe they look at income. So a lot of people qualify for PUA as an independent contractor. Some people qualify because they have a valid PUA claim. However, they, for whatever reason, did not qualify for a regular unemployment claim. And that would be based on the wages in the prior year, the base year. And could you give us a little more background on that?
Sure. So the program is set up so that it would use basically the same mechanism for determining your benefit as is used for regular unemployment insurance, except that the minimum number of hours, 680 hours, is required for regular UI, and PUA looks beyond that. It just looks at the amount of money you earned to get unemployment insurance and the proof that you've submitted of that income. So that would be your W-2s from 2020 or 2021, depending on what weeks you qualified for, or your 1099 income if you were an independent contractor. And usually they want the best form of proof for ESD is your 1040 tax return for whatever year you're talking about. Now, a lot of people obviously won't have that for 2021, but they should accept W-2s. So you may want to sit down and see if those numbers what those numbers roughly add up to for a 4-quarter period. Basically, what did you make in a year, and figure that your benefit should be around less than half of that, very, very roughly. If it's not, then you may want to call and say you don't think you're getting the right benefit, and maybe for some reason they didn't get the documents that you submitted. That happens very often. So you can try to resubmit them. So I would recommend calling the claims center and telling them what your situation is. What happens, the reason you get the lower amount is because if they feel like they don't have enough documentation, they will automatically give you the minimum, which is now $295. So you're probably talking about a little bit earlier period. So that covers a lot of people, but there's a lot of people that have fallen through the cracks there. So call the claims center and ask them to straighten it out if you feel like you're getting shorted.
Thank you, Ann. Our next question is, why are the overpayment amounts different from the bill I'm getting versus on my overpayment notice? This person has requested a hearing and has not gotten their hearing yet. So we see this a lot. So there's 2 reasons we see generally for this. So the bill you get in the mail, or what shows up on your ESD services account, is a total amount owed. When you get a denial letter, they don't include any supplemental pandemic benefits, that extra 600 or that extra 300 for weeks. That accounts for some of the differences in the overpayment notices, from what might be in a letter that you get versus what shows up on the website or in monthly bills that you get. Another factor we see, and I must say this because often a person will get multiple decisions or notices out there for different weeks or different reasons, it can get very messy and very complicated. So it's important that everyone who's dealing with overpayment or go through the e-services account and look at any past notices, go to all notices, all letters, go back as far as you can and read everything. A lot of the letters are just, some of them are routine notices about eligibility, but often there were, a questionnaire that might not have been answered, or a letter saying there's an overpayment for a certain week or a certain period of time that maybe you missed, or maybe when you requested a hearing, you thought everything was covered, as most people do. Like they think, well, I'm requesting a hearing, it's going to resolve everything. But then when they get to the hearing, they find out it's only about, March through May, and there's an overpayment from, February, it's January and February as well, there for a different reason or maybe a different notice. And the judges at these hearings can't just go in and fix everything. Unfortunately, we wish they could, because we would love to be able to resolve an issue at a hearing for everything. But so it's important to go back and see. So again, two basic reasons. You have to look at what money was received as a supplement, and if that's the case, the supplement case, when you resolve the overpayment for the hearing, that should take care of the supplemental amount as well. And then the other thing is notices that might have been missed. And would you have anything to add on that?
This is the most frequent theme that we've been hearing lately from claimants who call, is that they're getting nonstop notices, in some cases multiple notices, a flood of notices saying that they owe an overpayment. There could be a lien on their house, there could be a seizure of their car, their bank account, or whatever. When they call the claim center, the claims agent said, don't worry about it. I've heard this several times now. What happens when we ask ESD about this? Well, part of it is that the IT system is a little bit out of control. There's some things that they can't stop right away. And one of them includes these overpayment notices, and they're threatening, they're unpleasant, they're really upsetting to people. So that is one explanation. We've been told, I've heard several times, agents have said, just ignore the notices. And ESD also says it has halted collections of overpayments. We're not seeing that either. So there is definitely a difference of viewpoint here on what's going on. But for sure, there's something wacky with the system, and it's a gigantic glitch that you should find that when you talk to the agents, be sure and get their confirmation that you're not in trouble. Most of them many of the calls I've heard about, they say, no, you don't have an overpayment, just ignore the notices. So if you can get that straightened out with a claim center, it might help you get some clarification.
All right, thank you. So we have a question from someone who is in a bad job situation and is thinking of quitting. I don't want to do a live full consultation, because that would be very irresponsible, because with very little information, it would not be appropriate. I'm going to put my name and phone number with my extension in the chat, so we can speak in terms of an individual consultation. But some of the issues touched on involve health and safety. And I want to give some general information on that, because this is a very common what we've seen prior to the pandemic, and of course after the pandemic, of whether you can quit your job to get unemployment. And the basic rules for unemployment that have been around for quite a while, let's say that a person may leave a job if it's unsafe, if they can prove the unsafe condition, that they work with management to try to resolve and give management time to resolve, as well as health issue, medical issue, if it becomes medically necessary to quit. Well, some people, it may be good to file for paid family leave that may be a better option for some people in some cases. But if it's quitting due to a medical reason, you definitely want to get documentation of it. You definitely want to work with the employer to get either a leave of absence or accommodation, and give them opportunities to do this. We see many cases where people don't do this, that are denied. We've done some hearings where if it's compelling enough, a judge may find that it wouldn't have made a difference if they sought accommodation, or a leave of absence wasn't possible. But it's important not to make these decisions on your own, to get legal advice from Unemployment Law Project or other attorneys with experience in unemployment, and to not quit suddenly in a moment of anger or a moment of frustration, because the things you could do to set up, it's important to get documentation and do things right to maximize your chances of getting benefits if you don't have another job lined up. And would you like to add anything else on those issues?
Yeah, just to add generally, your position is going, in terms of getting benefits and qualifying, is going to be a lot weaker if you quit than if you are fired. Because if you quit, you have to demonstrate that you have the burden of proof for showing that you had good cause for quitting. And as I mentioned, that can be difficult. That can be a difficult standard to meet. So just keep that in mind. Don't be hasty. And if you must quit, you must work with your employer first, because that is one of the first questions you will be asked is, did you try to get accommodation from the employer? And it's not possible in many cases, but you do need to make the effort.
Because actually, I'd like to add too that there are cases where there's medical issues where a person quits because the employer says, well, I don't want to give you that time off for those appointments or something like that, and the person quits. Well, it probably would have been better. Well, it's never better. I mean, it would be more likely to get a claim if you had, let's say, doctor's notes to talk about what medication or what medical appointments were needed, and provide this to the employer. And then if they say no, then or they fire you, then it's more of a clear cut case of, well, it's a clear termination by the employer, and your absences that they fired you for were medically necessary, and that that claim would likely be successful. So, but it's important to get individual consultation. And I spoke to a few people this week who referred to the some internet groups that post messages or things about unemployment, and a few things that were repeated back to me are just flat out incorrect. So be careful if you're reading some online messages or even talking to friends or family, and they give you information that it may or may not be accurate. It's good to check with the ESD website, check with the ESD, and check with Unemployment Law Project or other attorneys who have experience and knowledge with unemployment. Let's see here. Moving to other questions. Okay. This person got a bill for an overpayment. They're not sure why it's there, and they can't get into their e-services account. That something won't let them log in. So the system, I've been told by many people, has a lot of verification check procedures, and it can be hard to get in. Your best move would be to call the 800 number for ESD, wait on the line. It may take a while to talk to somebody, and then identify yourself and see about getting your username and password updated, or whatever you need to do to get in there, because online there will be letters and notices explaining why the overpayment existed, and if you disagree, as I'm sure you might, you can request the hearing. And if the appeal is late, it's still worth filing an appeal because a judge can find good cause for a late appeal, and there's some flexibility there. I wouldn't, you say, well, oh, the appeal was due in November and now it's end of January. I'm out of luck. It's like, well, a judge might be sympathetic to circumstances, so they will grant you a hearing no matter what. And at the hearing, the first issue would be why the appeal is late. Anne, would you like to add anything?
Just that there is a number, and I'm sorry I don't have it with me at the moment, but for secure access assistance, if you have just a secure access, that is logging on or your identity verification on the web to get onto the e-services site, then there is a number that you can ask just questions about that, only that topic. If you go to the homepage of ESD and put in security authentication or secure access, you should get that number. And they should be able to help you, because there are a lot of people in this boat because they have, maybe their email addresses have changed. That cancels all of your information with ESD, and they have to start from scratch. So do contact ESD about that. They should have a way to help.
All right, it looks like our last question here. The person says, I appealed an overpayment of $4,600, and it was determined the overpayment was not my fault and waived. Then it came back and they said that I could pay it back, so it was unwaived. So this person is still unemployed, husband is disabled, and the household income is short by a few thousand a month, and there's only a few $1,000s in savings. I want to appeal again and wonder if you have any advice. Okay, so I'm guessing what happened here is when you filled out the financial questionnaire about financial hardship, this is I would say a common scenario, but I've seen it a few times where the person reviewing it will say, oh, the overpayments for, in this case, $4,000 or $5,000, and you have this money in the bank. And what they fail to look at when they just do the math is where that money, why that money is there and what that money is needed for. And at hearings, some people have had some success with this issue of showing that money in savings was not just extra money, that money is essential. There were a couple of cases we've seen where the family had other hardships, like medical issues that were needed. I think of another case from years ago where the money in the bank was for college tuition for a daughter. Another case recently was a couple in their 70s who had a significant savings account, but that was their entire family nest egg, and they were actually retired. That they got their unemployment claim, and after that they retired. And so what looks like a lot of money in their savings account is actually not very much if you consider trying to live on that for 10 or 15 or 20 years. So appealing it's a good idea, and you can contact Unemployment Law Project for help with the hearing. On our website, there's contact information. Our phone number in Seattle, 206-441-9178 is our main number in Seattle. We also have an office in Spokane, and there's an email on our website as well to contact. So it's good to request the hearing and get either advice or representation when your hearing comes. Anne,
yes,
you'd like to add to that?
Only want to add that they are granting waivers at varying rates each month, and it's very difficult for us to see what is the pattern there. So I would keep plugging away, because there's in some cases there's possibility of blanket waivers that they haven't implemented yet. It doesn't sound like that would apply here, because it's more for smaller amounts that of PUA that people had an overpayment on. But I would keep trying, it sounds like you've already had a hearing, and you may be at the stage of the next level of appeal, which is not a hearing. It would be just a written appeal. But if you get in touch with us, we can help. We can try to help.
Yeah,
give you
it
advice.
could be a number of things. It could be at the petition for review level, but often what happens at an original hearings, there's a remand for the waiver, then there's another determination. So this could be appealing another hearing decision, or it could be appealing letter. But whatever it is, read it carefully, and feel free to contact our office for help or advice now or later. And I put my name and phone number in the chat there if you want to contact my extension. So, all right, looks like we are ready to wrap up for the day. Thank you very much. Thanks, Ann, and we will be back next week for another Monday webinar. Thank you.